everybody, and welcome to the Everything Voiceover podcast. My name is Justin D. Torres. We're here bringing you all the information you need to start your path into voiceover. Now, in today's episode, we're dealing with a question that I get a lot when it comes to new voice actors. Should I join the union or should I not? Is it good to be a non-union voiceover or is it not? I hear a lot of bad things about being a non-union voiceover artist. Should I join the union or not? It's tough to answer this question because I find a real value in the non-union voiceover community, both clients and actors. In this episode, we'll try and go a little in depth into the history of voiceover and how it's changed and what the pros and cons of non-union voiceover is. And hopefully, if there are any union people listening, thank you for listening. We're going to try and look on the positive side about this non-union voiceover thing and hopefully I can convince some of you that non-union voiceover is a necessary evil and that in the end, I think it does a lot of good. So in order to understand the non-union voiceover controversy, and it goes beyond just the fact that one is union and one is non-union, and that union people think you're taking your jobs and whatnot, it goes back to the history of voiceover. Now, in the early ages of voiceover, we're talking from the 1940s all the way up to the early 1990s, you had to live in an area next to voiceover agents and studios, which limited you to LA and New York. And in a lot of ways, if you want to get union voiceover work, you still have to go up to New York City and LA. You had to really network yourself in somehow, either through casting agents, still the same now. And a lot of the jobs were taken by very few people. When it came to cartoons, you had guys like Mel Blanc and Pat Fraley doing a million cartoons everywhere. And you had car commercials being done by the same person a majority of the time. You had the trailers done by Don LaFontaine, and you had a specific trailer-type voice. And usually those jobs were a lot of the same people, and it was very lucrative, extremely lucrative. It was not unheard of to make an entire wage for an entire year on a single job with when it came to commercials, because a lot of the production studios and a lot of the agencies would actually put up one single national campaign for their new sales item, and that would be all their eggs in one basket to put out there to try and get people to buy it. And you had TVs in everyone's homes, so you really had one major channel to get all your sales out there. So it really was a very lucrative community back then. But unfortunately, back then, smaller companies were unable to book good talent. They couldn't afford the union-style dues at that time, and so they wouldn't get high-quality voiceover. So you saw a real difference between local and national, as you kind of do now, but sometimes you might get a commercial where you're not too sure if it's local or if it's national, which is pretty cool. Jobs back then were much more lucrative, but there were fewer, and it was going to fewer people. Once the internet came, you saw smaller businesses be able to get better voiceover for a smaller cost, and only till recently have the home studios really been able to take on the quality of a production studio. Now, mind you, we are not sound engineers. We are not people who've went to school for years to try and figure out the perfect sound for voiceover. But I'll tell you this. When it comes to people who are hiring from a smaller business perspective, and when it comes to people who are even hiring from a commercial perspective, the acting is what comes through, not so much the quality of the voiceover. If you can have a clean voiceover with a semi-professional quality microphone and your acting is much better than the other person, I don't care if that person's union or not. The person who acts the crap out of that script and is the perfect sound for that company will win that job. So once the internet came, you had something of a perfect storm. Because of the creation of home studios and the internet and the ability to create files from home and send them around, you were able to see more and more talent, and different voices started coming up. And there was a diversification in the industry itself. You didn't have to have a hard sell voiceover to have a car company. You didn't have to have a booming voice or a voice of God for all the commercials. You saw things like conversational starting to get a little bit bigger. If you wanted to get a foreign sound, it was no longer that hard to get. And you end up seeing, when you watch commercials a lot nowadays, you hear different types of people. So like if you listen to ESPN, you may hear a young voice and an old voice and the old booming voice from the NFL films all at the same time. But unfortunately, what ended up happening as well was the average pay went down. National campaigns now were no longer just commercial and radio. They had to combine with internet, they had to combine with regional, they had to combine with radio, and radio could be regional itself. And what ended up happening was companies didn't have to put all their eggs in one basket anymore. They could do multiple campaigns, they could test it out on the internet, see if it works, then push it to commercial, and they started to become more careful with their money. And production studios started working with non-union first as a test run, and then use union after, and sometimes they would stay with the non-union. So definitely the average pay of the professional voice actor ended up becoming less. But there were a lot more jobs because the jobs themselves got diversified. And what happened was the total number of jobs went up. The average company could get voiceover from non-union people first, and if their company started making lots more money, they could graduate to a union voiceover at some point, or they could start using higher quality production studios as well. And you had things like industrials and tutorials and mini short films and all these web animations. They all needed voiceover for a smaller price because they were going off on the internet, and people did not understand how much return on investment was coming from the internet. They still don't know how much money you're getting from the internet. If you're putting an ad out on the internet and you're selling stuff, you don't know exactly where it comes from. Now they're starting to understand a little bit more, but when it comes to promotions and internet ads and whatnot, they had to start with a smaller price because they didn't know if they were going to get any of their money back at all. And then you saw pay-to-play sites going up like Voices.com, VoiceBunny, Voice123, and they were becoming the middleman. What these sites do is they provide a client with 50 to 100 auditions from voice actors all over the world, and they get to choose from them, and then the voice actors get to audition, and the site gets a piece of the end product, and then they also charge a hefty year subscription to be a part of the site. And the voice actor, in most cases, must record it themselves, edit it themselves, and then put the job up themselves as well. So clients are now getting an entire production studio out of a voiceover artist for a smaller amount than ever. What also ended up happening is that non-union agencies started popping up in the major metropolitan areas. And then even union agencies started having non-union sectors within their agencies. And this is just a way for agents to get a piece of the non-union pie that exists, because there are a lot of production studios in New York and LA that are non-union, and they maybe only want to go with a non-union voiceover artist for this particular thing. Those smaller jobs make a lot of money as well. So in order for them to get a piece of that pie, you've got non-union agents, and you've also got union agencies having non-union sectors, and they're also going to be more open to seeing non-union talent, which is great because it used to be a catch-22 where you had to be a union actor to be a part of an agency, but how do you get to union if you don't have an agent? And how do you get auditions to be union if you don't have an agent? And you couldn't figure out how to get in. Now agencies are more likely to see non-union talent, which is more beginner talent, because they have sections of their agencies for non-union jobs. So what you're starting to see is that the beginner voiceover talent will now have a practice ground to try and get better at their craft. And that practice ground is usually at their home, combined with auditioning outside in studios, and probably with non-union casting directors and non-union agents. And it's also not unheard of for even casting directors to do both union and non-union jobs. Because in the end, if a client comes to you and says, I have a union job for $10,000 and a non-union job for $1,000, do you want both or you do want one? The casting director is more likely to be like, yeah, I could do both of them. Now, unfortunately, this causes a lot of complaints because voiceover has definitely changed. It has definitely changed. The major complaint is that there's less paying jobs, but that could also be a couple of different factors, not necessarily the non-union voiceover aspect. That's definitely because of the internet being started, and that's also because celebrities are starting to realize that voiceover is pretty good money. Celebrities are starting to get into the major voiceover commercial market, and a lot of the really good union voiceover artists are losing those jobs to celebrities. Also, the addition of non-union agencies and non-union segments of union agencies are starting to legitimize the sector. They want to be able to get a piece of the pie too. And if you're a union actor, you're thinking, why is my agency putting a non-union thing there when they should be reinforcing the union? But in the end, it's just accepting the way things are and going forward. Production studios are taking non-union and union jobs as well. And here's an interesting thing I heard a while ago from voice actors. And they said, it used to be that I could do one job and it would take care of me for a year. And that sounds amazing. That sounds ridiculously amazing. And I wish I could have lived in a time where that was possible. That's wonderful. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the greatest of things to be going after. I think the major reason why you could do a job and it would last an entire year is because the value of that one commercial that you did was so valuable to that company that you did it with that they had to make sure everything was taken care of for a long period of time. I think what ends up happening nowadays is that companies no longer, they definitely value commercials and they value promotion, but I believe they value more separated promotions rather than one at a time. Now, the other obvious thing about being non-union is that you're not represented, you have no health, you have no protection, no security, no pension. And I'm the first one to say absolutely. I would go heads first into becoming a SAG-AFTRA member to get health and securities along those lines. Unfortunately, there's minimums that you have to get, and it has to be through union jobs. People don't tell you this, but you have to make at least $10,000 a year or $30,000 if you want the better type of insurance, and you're going to be paying on a monthly basis for those insurances as well. Now, that seems totally doable. Like, for me, I make a certain amount of money on non-union every year, but when it comes to union jobs, they're only few and far between. You are dependent on agents to get you out to auditions to get that $10,000. And especially when you're new to the agency world, you're going to be working for scale. And scale can be as low as about $1,000. You'd probably have to pull 10 jobs. So it's not unheard of to have actors that are union to be doing TV, background, film, radio, and voiceover to be able to make their minimums to get health insurance. And it's also not unheard of to see when I was looking at Equity, which is the theater union, that a person would be doing stage managing and acting in seasons just to be able to get the health insurance. Now, that's not to say that's not a good thing. I just feel like, personally, when it comes to my end, it's almost impossible for me to make that $10,000 if it means 10 union jobs a year. And the competition is fierce in the union market, really fierce. And people are more likely to hire people they know than people they don't know. The other main complaint about the way voiceover is now is that non-union is taking away jobs from union. And you got to take in consideration who is hiring. Who is the production studio that is hiring the non-union actor? And you got to ask them, do you think these clients were ever going to be willing to hire a production studio? Were they ever willing to hire a sound engineer? Were they ever willing to hire an agent to try and find that person? Did they have it in their budget to do a minimum of $500 for the job, possibly even $1,000, depending on where they're using it? Is the job even that big to be able to use it? And also, let's take the reverse aspect. There are plenty of actors that use FICOR to get non-union jobs, and there are plenty of actors that use a different name to do non-union voiceover jobs. In my opinion, and this is only my opinion, I never judge a person for how they make their money. I never judge a person for how they feed themselves. I would never judge a union person to be able to do FICOR, and I would never judge a person, a union who's just couldn't find any jobs and said, you know what, I'm going to change my name and I'm going to go non-union and I'm going to do work because it's so hard to be a working actor. And in my opinion, it's a little bit worse to go from the top to the bottom and steal from the bottom as opposed to stealing from the top. Another thing you got to take into consideration is that voiceover is very fickle. There's a lot of times where the voiceover industry and commercials will skew a certain way, either more conversational or more cool. A lot of times there'll be like a specific type of voiceover that's like Morgan Freeman, and that's going to be the popular one this year. And those styles start changing. You can't complain about the way the audience feels or the way clients feel about what they think is popular. Now, let me get this one thing straight. Every non-union person would be willing to join the union if the job was amazing as it used to be. 100%. If someone signed me on for a national tomorrow, and I'm at that point where I'm just about SAG eligible, if someone signed me on for a thing tomorrow that I knew I would get like $50,000 to $100,000 and a residual of X amount, I would join right away. And I think a lot of non-union people would join right away as well. But unfortunately, those jobs don't really exist anymore. And now you're getting a lot of the smaller jobs, and that's hurting us non-union as well, because we're looking at the possibility of joining union, and those jobs won't even pay for the initiation fee. Maybe the union should probably take down their initiation fee, and maybe the union should open up for lower paying jobs so that people can hit the $10,000 limit. You know? It's one thing to say that we're not supporting the union. It's another thing to say that the union really supporting the atmosphere we have today, making it possible for every union talent, every SAG-AFTRA talent, to be able to hit their minimums. Now, at this point, I firmly believe we can't change back the clocks. We're not going to be back to where we were. But here's my concluding opinion here. You're creating a better actor. A voice actor is now savvy, is a marketer. They have a stacked resume. They're an editor. They're a technical person. It's also creating more and more working actors. Working actors are few and far between. If you think about it, all the other forms of acting with theater's taking hits now, and theaters are closing left and right. Radio is starting to dwindle because iHeartRadio is taking over everything. Like, big companies are taking over all the radio stations, so you're not seeing very many personalities like you used to. But voiceover is starting to bloom. If you're an out-of-work actor and you're non-union, becoming a voiceover actor for non-union voiceover may get you some extra cash. Admittedly, it's not like you're creating something with theater. It's not like you're getting fame from film. It's not like radio in that you're really bringing your full personality to viewers and listeners out there, but it's a combination of all three. And for some reason, and this is my belief, is that it's valued more than theater. And I personally truly value theater. It's a wonderful art. I did it forever. I loved it. I did it for zero pay for a long time. And even when I started doing equity jobs, it felt like it was zero pay. And if there are theater actors out there, I would say, don't think this is beneath you. If you could live a life where you did a couple of voiceover jobs a week, non-union voiceover jobs, and then you could also do theater for that extra $500 a week or $300 a week for that amazing company that can't afford to pay you that much, it can bolster you. It can keep you up and running. It can keep you from getting another job. I truly value non-union voiceover. I truly value the world that we live in, where I can be an actor who makes enough money to pay his rent and his food with voiceover. Now it isn't that much, and there's always a possibility of more, but it's not a starving man's wage. It's just something to think about when you're joining the non-union voiceover ranks. If you ever get into that situation where you're like, should I be union? Should I be non-union? I think people should just be thankful that they're starting out in a situation where you can actually make money right out of the gate. And that's a great thing. I could only imagine back in the day in the 90s where you really wanted to get into voiceover and you were spending thousands of dollars on classes just wondering and hoping if you get in. Whereas nowadays, at least you can make a couple $100s back. My name is Justin D. Torres. Head over to everythingvoiceover.com, check out the articles, other podcasts. We're going to be having some really great talent in soon to talk to, and you won't have to listen to my voice the entire time. Hopefully this was informative for you. Make sure to like us on Facebook, go to Twitter, like us there. Other than that, thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.